The Muslims around the world basically have a religious calendar, and they also have common calendar. We have January to December, and then we have Muharram to Zulhijjah. And when we look at the religious calendar, the Hijrah calendar, this is used by us, especially in this part of the world, for our religious observations, celebrations, and events. However, although historically Muharram is the beginning of the year, just as January is the beginning of the common year, but not everything actually starts with January or Muharram. You look at the common calendar, how do you look at the academic year? Is it from January to December? No, the academic year starts in September, ends next year in June. Similarly, when we look at Islam, the Muslims' calendar, the Hijri calendar, not everything begins with Muharram. Especially if you look at the spiritual season. This is what I would call it, the spiritual season of Islam. It begins in Rajab and reaches to its peak during the month of Ramadan. And it's interestingly that we see, in the ahadith that we have from the Ahlul Bayt, we are told that Rajab is the month of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Sha'ban is the month of Rasulullah, and Ramadan is the month of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they are very well connected to one another in that way. It is from Ali you reach to Rasul, from Rasul you reach to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the reason why if you look at Mafatih al-Jinan, you might not have noticed that there is a section there of the A'mal according to the months. You will see it doesn't start with Muharram. That section doesn't begin with Muharram and then Safar and then Rabiul Awwal. It starts from Rajab, because that is the beginning of the spiritual season. And Alhamdulillah, now we are into it. And I wanted to briefly talk about the spiritual dimension of it. There is a ritual dimension, social dimension, and spiritual dimension. As far as the rulings are concerned, I don't think we have to go back to the Masail. MashaAllah, all of you have gone through the madrasa system. You heard the majalis and the speeches on this issue for years and years. And so it is expected that you know the basic rulings about it. What I would like to emphasize tonight is the issue of thinking about maximizing the benefit of the fasting of Ramadan. Because when it comes to the basic rulings, we prepared something this year which was distributed on Thursday as well as tonight, and tomorrow we'll continue that. It's basically a collection of things I have written in the last 20 years or so, different talks I had given. I just put them together, beginning with as a barakat from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, which is his sermon welcoming the month of Ramadan. Then there is an article generally talking about the fasting in general, all different aspects. Page number 7 brings to a chart, which actually is online on the website for many years now, which is one page giving you what are the muftirat and the things which will violate the fasting. In all, there are about 10 items. Then we go on to the next page, page number 8, where we are talking about those who are exempted from fasting. Talking about the elderly people who cannot fast at all, those who, even elderly, who can fast but with difficulty, different rulings for them. temporary illness, long-term illness, cases of pregnant women or nursing mother, and then even the issue that if this is summertime now and if you are working, let's say, on a construction site outside, with the heat and the sun of the day, it will become very difficult. What happens to such a person? And then on the next page, page 9, we have a chart talking about different cases where qaza would be applicable, where fidya would be applicable, where the kafara would be applicable. Then we go on to the traveling in the month of Ramadan. These are all the masail I expect you to know. Then coming to this issue of use of medicine while you are fasting. And then ending with a very brief, kind of what I term here, a peek into the spiritual dimension of fasting. And that's actually I would like to, emphasize tonight in this speech. If you look at the Quran, salawat padhne ek baar pehle. In Surah Baqarah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this ayat. This is in the second year of the Hijrah in Medina. So fasting started in Medina. So if you have a quiz for your students, you can say, did Ramadan, fasting start in Mecca? You should know the answer. It started in the second year, and the ayat which came down is all in one place. Ayat number 183 of Surah Baqarah to 187. The most important thing that I would like to draw your attention to is the very first ayat and the last ayat. In the very beginning, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the command for fasting. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. O you who fast. O you who believe. Kutiba alaykumus siyam. Fasting has been made a duty on you. Kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum. Just as it was made a duty on the nations which came before. So don't think that Allah is putting extra burden on you. There were nations before also. Christianity has tradition of fasting. They forgot on it. That's a different issue, but it's there in their books. Jewish people have the tradition of fasting. Even if you look at Buddhism, Hinduism, all of them have this tradition of fasting. So there's nothing new that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prescribed for us. But then the last two words, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. This is actually the soul of this whole process of fasting. The word la'alla is used in Arabic by the speaker when he expects something from the audience. He hopes that they will do this. So the proper translation would be la'allakum. Hopefully you will acquire taqwa. And this is where we have to realize that, taqwa is actually purpose of fasting. All other things, other dimensions, whether it is charity that we give in Ramadan because of fasting, are all good things. But the main purpose that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made fasting wajib on us is that we acquire taqwa. And what is taqwa? Taqwa basically is this, awareness that we should have that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there. Sometimes on a subconscious level, we confine Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to a space or time. For us, Allah is there more in Ramadan and Muharram. Besides that, no. He's there in masjid. If I'm in business, this is business, nothing to do with deen and mazhab and sharia. This is where we divide Allah's presence, in our own mind on a subconscious level. He's there, but not there. And this is where we have to think about it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He talks about taqwa, He's talking that Allah should be there at all the time. Of course, for us the example is Imam al-Muttaqeen. Amir al-Mu'mineen is a saying, of course this is him. At least you can just get inspiration from him when he says, I don't see anything. I don't look at anything but that but that Allah, I see Allah before it and after it. And whatever I do, Allah's presence is there in my life, in my decision, in my action, at all the time. You know the famous example of him fighting against Amr ibn Abd Wud in the Battle of Khandaq. He's busy, dealing with this enemy who is equal to 100 warriors. But still, this issue of Allah's presence is there. He says, I don't want to do this out of my anger. I want to do it only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is the meaning when we say Ali is Imamul Muttaqeen. He is the Imam of those who have taqwa. And so when we talk about this issue of taqwa, we have to realize that this is something very important. And if we don't think about it, we will not be able to elevate our fasting to higher levels. Basically, at the end of the booklet here, the pamphlet that we have, I talked about it briefly, that our ulama, the scholars who deal with akhlaq and spirituality, they basically have divided the fasting into 3 levels. And this actually comes from one of the hadiths of Amir al-Mu'mineen, where he says that there are 3 types of fasting. One is known as Sawmul Qalb, fasting of the heart. And that is khayrun min siyamil lisan. It is better than the fasting of the tongue. And then he says, وَصِيَامُ اللِّسَانِ خَيْرٌ مِّن صِيَامِ الْبَطْنِ. And the fasting of the tongue is better than the fasting of the belly. And this is where we see that, when we talk about different levels, we have a basic level, and then we have this, moral level, and then we have a higher spiritual level. Just to give you an example of, what do we mean by that, and how even Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in the famous khutbah that he has, he talks about it in that way. He said the basic level is the level of what Amir al-Mu'mineen says, Siyamul Batn. Refraining from food and drink, or the physical desires that we have. Look at the list of 10 things which are haram. Almost, other than the last one, all are related to our desires of the body, in one way or another. Whether it is food and drink, or sexual desires, or the issue, for example, one of the examples would be the issue of smoking, for example, addiction to that. And so all these are the issues that we deal with that, and alhamdulillah, mu'mineen refrain from that in fasting. But that is not the end of the process. This is actually just the beginning. We have to actually go to the 2nd level and then the 3rd level of fasting. Because we have to realize that, when we talk about this issue of fasting, this is not only the physical exercise, that at the end of the month, we lose few pounds. That is accidental benefit, but the essence of fasting is taqwa. And this is where we have to realize that our imams, in the ahadith that they have, they say, Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam, he says when you fast, it's your eyes should fast, your ears should fast, your hands should fast, your feet should fast. Now what does it mean? These are not in the list of the 10 things we see in Tawzil Masail of our fuqaha and mujtahideen. This is where we see that our Aimma is saying, do not, restrict yourself to the legal level, ritual level of fasting, the basic level. Move forward. It's not only if, for example, somebody hears something which is haram, does the fasting become batil? Do they have to do qada or kafara? No. Their roza is still okay. Even though it's haram, If they see something which is haram, it is not there in the list of 10 things which invalidates the fasting. And this is where Imam is saying, it's not only these 10 things, you have to reach to a higher level, where your whole body should be fasting with you. And this is where we have to realize that, one of the hadiths we have from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he says, when the person is fasting, even his naum, even his state of sleeping is considered to be in ibadah. Now, when you talk about sleeping, what is sleeping? When you go to sleep, your wuzu becomes batil. If you were in wuzu and you go to sleep, your wuzu is gone. You are not even conscious of what you are doing. You are sleeping. But Rasulullah says a person who is in the state of sleeping while he is fasting, even that act of sleeping is an ibadah. But then he puts a condition there. He says, مَا لَمْ يَخْتَبْ مُسْلِمًا, provided that person has not backbited a Muslim. Look at the list of 10 things in muftirat. Is, ghibat there? Ghibat is not there. But the reason why Rasulullah is mentioning here is that if you do ghibat, technically your roza is still okay. You don't have to do qaza, you don't have to pay kafara, there is no fidya. You are still okay. Legally you have fasted. But then you lose that extra level and the extra sawab. That when you go to sleep in the state of fasting, even your act of naum becomes an ibadah. In the khutbah of Rasulullah that we have in this book, he says, this is a month where anfasukum fihi tasbih. Even this process of breathing, which we don't even do consciously, it is part of our nature, automatically we do it. If we don't do it, we'll die. But we don't even realize what we are doing because it is part of this system. Even then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, breathing while you are fasting is like you are doing tasbih. Allahu Akbar, subhanallah, alhamdulillah. And this is where we see that, this extra sawab of fasting, وَنَوْمُكُمْ فِيهِ عِبَادَةً, in the same khutbah, he says, your sleep in this month during the state of fasting is an ibadah. But of course there are conditions there. One of the conditions is don't do ghibat, which means that you have to do the fasting of the tongue, of the ears, of the eyes, and the hand and the feet. If you are able to maintain that, then your sawm reaches from the level of siyamul batn to this siyamul qalb, or at least siyamul lisan. And then you get the ajr and sawab that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is talking about. Even in our behavior with others. There is one story which, of course, the context shows that it's not during the month of Ramadan. I'm sure you heard of it many times. That there was a lady who was actually, she had a slave or a maid working for her, and she had done something that the lady of the house was not happy with it. So she became angry and started saying abusive words to her. Now, Rasulullah in his own khutbah there, he says that this is the month where, be lenient to those who are under you, your workers, your subordinates, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be lenient to you. Especially in the state of Ramadan. In our society, especially if you go to the East, in the month of Ramadan, people's temper is even higher. In general, we have this saying, usko roza lag gaya What does it mean? Well, in the state of roza and fasting, you're supposed to control yourself even more. You have to calm yourself even more. And this is where we see that, when we talk about the second level of fasting, it is the issue of, even improving our own behavior. When Rasulullah saw this lady abusing her maid or the slave or the servant, and it was not definitely a month of Ramadan, he asked somebody to bring khurma. He knew she was fasting. And he says to her, why don't you eat this? And she says, but I'm fasting, Ya Rasulullah. And she said, what kind of fast is this that you are using this abusive language against your own servant? This was an example to say that you are fasting on one hand and your behavior with those who are subordinate to you is not right. So your siyam, it shouldn't only be the siyam of batan, it should also be the siyam of lisan. How you, behave with the people. Especially during the month of Ramadan, we have to be extra careful towards one another, whether it is lining up for iftihar or other things. Even the volunteers have to be more kinder and calmer during this month. Yes, it's the whole day's fast was there, lekin roza lagna nahi chahiye. That's the whole imtihan of fasting. That you go through the fasting but still maintain your calm at that time. And this is where we have to realize that we have to move from one level to another. And then finally, when Amir al-Mu'minin talks about sawmul qalb, fasting of the heart. This is of course for awliya and for those who are very close to them, those who have been spiritually touched by them. And this is a state where they are never spiritually absent from the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And these are actually the people where Rasulullah in that khutbah, when he says that du'itum ila dhiyafatillah, you have been invited this month to be among the guests of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That unwan of being the zaif and the guest of Allah is not for the basic level. It's not only for the sake, it's actually for the highest level. And that is where we have to really think about وَأَهْلَ كَرَامَةِ اللَّهِ, and those whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honors during this month. And so inshallah, during this month of Ramadan, besides doing all the regular things, refraining from food and drink and other, activities of pleasure, we should even think about, improving our level of sawm, from the siyam of batan to siyamul lisan, and from siyamul lisan to siyamul qalb. And that is where we'll really be able to attain that barakah that Rasulullah says you will be among du'itum ila dhiyafatillah. You will become among those who have been invited to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He will be the host and you will be the guest. And with that you will have the karama and the honor from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salawat. Just one very common issue that I would like to talk about is the issue of niyyat, which is very important. Everything in Islam and ibadat depends on niyyat. Of course, you don't have to do niyyat verbally. You don't have to renew it every day at Fajr time. As long as in your mind you know this is the month of Ramadan and I am doing this because of that fasting, that you are okay. It's not that you missed out at the time of Fajr, so you have to then do something to remedy your fasting. No, everything depends on the niyyat, and niyyat is actually the state of mind and not a verbal declaration of anything. And that is something very important. It has to continue from Fajr till Maghrib. And when I say continue, it doesn't mean you constantly say, yeah, I'm fasting, I'm fasting, I'm fasting. No. It means, you shouldn't do an intention which will be contrary to the intention of fasting. And I give you this, use the example many times, by the evening time, especially with this long fasting, you are there in your family room watching TV, but then you smell this iftar being cooked. So the desire is there. Having that desire is okay. But then you get up, move towards the kitchen, and you see the food and say, I'll pay the kafara and do the qaza, I'll eat. When you say that, now you have a niyat which is contrary to the niyat of fasting. Even though your wife pulls the plate away, and you don't get to eat, but because your niyat was interrupted, your roza for that day becomes batil. In that case, of course, there is no kafara, you just have to do qada later on. Because your niyat was interrupted with a contrary niyat. That's the main thing. So when we talk about continuity of the niyat, it means, a niyat will be which goes against the niyat of fasting. And so, inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give tawfiq to all of us, to understand not only the ahkam, but even the spiritual dimension of fasting, so that we can attain that barakah that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has mentioned in his khutbah. We have about 10 minutes. I would like to leave it open for any questions. Understand even the ladies have a mic downstairs, so if there is any question, we will entertain that alternatively, men and then women. You have a question here? Mm-hmm. The question is that, even in the state of fasting, we have to work in a non-Muslim environment. There would be women without hijab. Well, the whole issue is that you maintain your modesty of your eyes. If you look at Surah Nur, the ayat about hijab, it's interesting that the first hukum of hijab is for the eyes. قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Or the Prophet say to the believing men that they should lower their gaze. And then the ayat goes on and tell the women the same thing. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the hijab of the clothing. And in the month of Ramadan, this becomes even more important. As the sixth Imam said, even your eyes should fast. So you have to be extra, careful when it comes to the level where even the hijab, fast of eyes becomes more important. In case of kafara, wherever the question is, when you have to pay the kafara, then do you have also to do qada? I don't know of any case where there would be kafara without qada. So what you missed, you still have to do. But then kafara is a fine, penalty. Yes, you have to do both. So if somebody misses a fast without any good reason, then that person has to make it up. So that is just making up. And then there is a fine he or she has to pay for missing out. And the kafara is actually, there are 3 levels. I'm just going to the last one, which is feeding 60 poor people per day at a ratio of 750 grams each. So that comes to what? About 22.5 per day. Any question from ladies? Yes. There is a section there which talks about the nafila prayers during the nights of Ramadan. And the first 20 nights, it is 20 rakat in 2 rakat each. So 20 rakat, so that's 10 times by 2 rakat. Can you do that in place of namaz al-shab? You can do that. There wouldn't be a problem. I think that's a...
Excuse me, can the ladies ask their question now? Assalamu alaikum. If a woman has qaza fast, and during the course of the year, due to negligence, she doesn't fast till the next Ramadan, does she have to pay kafara for that, or does she pay fidya on top of the qaza fast?
In the case that you have mentioned, no, there will be no kafara. She still has to do the qaza after the second year. But then because it was not done within 1 year's time, then she has to now pay fidya also. Fidya is just 750 grams per day. It's always better to make it double 1.5 kilo. Any other question from the ladies?
Yes. We have a question from a lady asking that when you're fasting, can you wear an oxygen mask if needed?
Wearing oxygen mask would be okay. There's no problem there. It's just a matter of, getting help in, breathing process. So it's not substitute of drinking water, for example. So there shouldn't be a problem. Just like even, not only that, but even if you look at those who have asthma, if they need to use the puffer, most probably the spray goes through the lungs and not the stomach. And so that should be okay. Any question from the men side? What about going for blood test? Is it permissible when you are fasting? Anything to do with taking out is okay. So the blood is been taken out, so there's no issue there. Technically, even giving blood, donation would be okay. However, it shouldn't be such that you are not able to fast. So that's again something you have to keep in mind at that time. Any question from ladies' side? we'll end the talk. I just would like to emphasize, sometimes people have this confusion because of the timings of mention on the website for my office hours. It's not for the telephone calls. That is for the meeting. Sometimes people say, oh, I have to call you between 11 and 2. No, you can call me whenever you want. It is the meeting time, which is between 11 and 2, before Zuhur and after Zuhur. Especially in the month of Ramadan, of course, I keep the ringer on because people have different questions. Sometimes they get up for Sahri and they are not sure they are okay or not. So it's okay. At least for the early nights, it's okay. I'll keep the ringer on. The difference between imsak time and fajr time. Fajr is a time like sunrise or sunset or zawal. Imsak is not a time. Imsak just means withholding your hand from eating and drinking. So it's not really a time that, okay, now imsak happened. And so, what it means is that you should stop eating and drinking at the Fajr time. That is the beginning of fasting. But if you look at the clocks inside one house, you will always see it's 2-3 minutes different from one another. So just to make sure you have, stopped eating before the actual time of Fajr, imsak is just a precaution. So it could be, we just put 5 minutes, some people put 15 minutes. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين